The opulent interior of the Lagos Oriental Hotel was a setting for POTICO 3 harnessing innovative technology to create proper infrastructure for agricultural development. As global food production levels fall and world population rises, it has become imperative for developing nations to use modern technology to create the infrastructure needed to increase agricultural output. It's only at POTICO that strategic thinkers with practical experience from both the private sector and government agencies in and outside Nigeria channel their energies towards rejuvenating Nigeria's trade in non-oil commodities.
My background has always been in international trade and expanding international trade, trying to bridge the gap between the developed and the developing world, the Western world and the emerging markets. And of course, doing a lot of work in Africa and doing a lot of work in Nigeria, trying to expand international trade between Nigeria and the US. We came to the analysis that the oil companies would always be able to function with or without additional help because there's oil in Nigeria. But you had a huge manufacturing sector, you had a huge non-oil sector that needed help. And having worked on the African Growth and Opportunity Act on Capitol Hill, we decided, I got together with a couple of our partners, the US ambassador, the managing director of the Bank of Industry, and to figure out how we can move non-oil exports to the US. And that was the beginning thought on POTICO.
POTICO has been about solutions since 2008, and the pool of experts at POTICO 3 was very significant. The United States Ambassador to Nigeria, Dr. Robin Rennie Sanders, the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture under the Clinton administration, Mr. Mike Espy, Dr. Darius Mans, President of Africa, and former head of the Millennium Challenge, and delegates from United States agencies. The local representation was also top-notch. The Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Lamido Sanusi, the Managing Director of Bank of Industry, Ms. Evelyn Oputu, Mr. Stephen Onasoya, the Group Managing Director of one of Nigeria's most trusted and innovative commercial banks, First Bank PLC, and to represent Private Rural Development Initiative, the Executive Director of the Smallholders Foundation, an NGO that supplies agricultural extension services via radio. For the United States, POTICO has been an important strategic platform for increased bilateral trade since its inception in 2008, and from all indications, this will continue to be.
We actually have a tripartite partnership in POTICO. Bank of Industry, U.S. Mission, and the U.S. government agencies that are here. Many of you may have read that we've launched a binational commission with Nigeria. It's a strategic dialogue with Nigeria on key sectoral issues. One of those key sectoral issues will be agriculture, and there is a working group under the binational commission that will focus on agriculture and food security and agricultural development.
We started POTICO wanting to increase the capacity and the trade between Nigeria and the U.S. But today I can tell you, Madam Ambassador, and to our friends and our sisters and our partners, especially First Bank, that what we have found is not just an increase in terms of the businesses that have developed between Nigeria and the United States, but in terms of the quality and the capacity of these SMEs. When you affect lives, you change the world. And Madam Ambassador, I thank you for the work that you've done with us.
Two panels of leading discussants examined agricultural sustainability and creating the right environment for agricultural innovations. The questions: why agriculture in Nigeria remains dependent on subsistence farming, and how can the private sector, commercial finance institutions, and government agencies join forces to change the existing model?
The major factor militating against food production and lending to the agri sector in Nigeria is very simple. We've got to be able to make agri profitable. That's the problem. Nigerians are not lazy. If you know how far we go to be able to survive, to put money on the table, it's very clear that if agri is made a profitable business, Nigerians will go into that line of business. And so I'm happy that the theme for today's event is also looking at how to remove impediments towards making agri profitable. Typically, we follow the Joneses in Nigeria. Once one person is able to do it and do it well, every other person will move and follow before the line. The basic things we need to address would be, how do you ensure that the typical farmer is able to transport his goods, products, away from the village into a ready market that will also pay a commensurate price, a commercially viable price for those products? We've got to also be able to address the issue of storage. If you look at the tomatoes, this is a simple example. Half of those tomatoes get rotten and spoiled before you get to the market. Because everybody wants to bring it to Lagos, everybody wants to bring it to the urban centers. So long as we are not able to address these few issues, including possibly a guaranteed market at a guaranteed price for the products, we will just be dancing and dancing around it. Banks will continue, First Bank will continue to lend to the agri sector, but we also need to address the issue of appropriate securitization of the lendings or the loans.
I came here about 4 years ago as a consultant to a Akwa State. Governor Atta, who was the former governor of Akwa State, hired me to come in to analyze the value chain when it came to processing. And we recognized that at that particular state, there had to be more protein provided to improve the nutrition of the consumers. So we needed more hog farms, more hog processing plants. We needed more chicken farms, more chicken processing plants. We needed more rice farms and rice processing plants. In Akwa State, there was a need for, which is a coastal state, as you know, we needed more fish farms. And so I was able, with the help of Governor Atta, to go around the world to bring in investors for these value-added enterprises in Akwa State. Some were very successful, and unfortunately some, because of the economic situation in the world with price reductions, did not make it. But I found that the central problem when it came to small stakeholders was the provision, the lack of credit, the lack of inputs, the lack of mechanization, the lack of storage.
It's the lack of information reaching farmers on how they will be able to produce a better product, on when they will produce, on what they will produce, and for whom they are producing for. Because agricultural extension services in Nigeria has been non-functional. And there is lack of infrastructure to support electricity so that farmers can switch on the television and listen to information on how to boost their income and their agricultural productivity. Because newspaper vendors do not go to rural areas because they don't have a market. Because researches done by the best research institutes in Nigeria always turn out their research outcome in English. And millions of small farmers across Nigeria do not read English, they do not understand English. But in every rural household, there is a battery-operated transistor radio.
To me, action needs to be taken on 3 fronts. One is at the macroeconomic level, to ensure that inflation comes down, real interest rates come down, trade becomes much more competitive as an opportunity for export. I think at the agriculture-wide level, already the 5-point plan in Nigeria identifies some of the key actions that need to be taken to make agriculture more competitive. I like very much what the first thing said earlier, the challenge of making agriculture much more profitable. As it stands today, we know there are a couple of commodities that are internationally competitive in Nigeria. I think the big opportunities, and where Africare works, is in helping to improve
Now, if you just think of it, a 20% increase, just 20% increase in agricultural productivity would lead to a GDP growth of 8%. And that is higher than GDP has grown in any 1 year in the last 10 years. That's an entire GDP. There are serious questions about the seriousness of the policy. If you go to East Africa, if you go to Southern Africa, you will find that agriculture ranks very high in terms of government priorities. Now, we always speak as a government of agriculture being priority. But at the end of the day, what you need in agriculture very often is not even spending money. It is simply a question of having the right policies and the right thought process. And I'll give you a few examples of things that have been done.
The standard format at POTICO is interactive, so the diverse audience also had their voices heard.
The government of this country had, over the years, commissioned many high-level studies to unravel the dilemma that the agriculture sector had gotten into, our inability to develop the sector over 50 years, not because we are not enormously endowed, but because we cannot organize ourselves to do that. We have realized that the biggest challenge, as the managing director of the First Bank had said earlier, was to make the agriculture sector competitive, to make agriculture profitable. Now, in the last few years, I think probably the biggest development, the most significant recent development in the sector had been the acceptance by the government that the absence of modern physical infrastructure at all levels of the agriculture production cycle, at all levels of the value chain.
We have discovered from the research work we have been doing for the past 10 years in agriculture in Nigeria, our NGO, that the smallholder farmers are being neglected, even in funding. They have not been taken care of. We have research work based on what I'm saying. So what is the bank doing to make sure that these smallholder farmers that constitute over 75% of the production we are having in this country, what are they doing to make sure that these people are empowered?
I must say that we must encourage the small scale holders and at the same time develop commercial agriculture. Because on the one hand, you are providing employment and you are developing the people in the rural areas. But at the same time, we need to embark upon large-scale commercial agriculture. And this is where the private sector comes. This is where the banks come in. In making use of the technologies that other developed countries have embarked upon, we must adopt modern technology affecting water management, agri-inputs, seeds, fertilizer, and so on, even processing and marketing.
With the plenary discussions over and done with, the partners at POTICO tabled their deliberations before selected members of the Nigerian media.
We've had people who would ordinarily not be able to access any market at all. We have a leather entrepreneur who's exporting his leather, another doing cashew, another doing cassava chips. We have loads of them that I can't even begin to count because it's only the first 2, 3 cashew nuts. We have all of them. So the fallout of it is that people have a little bit more confidence in the system. One of the original thoughts was to ensure that the rural community continues to produce. If you do not have buyers and if you have a lot of wastage, then you will not produce in the next season. Now that they know that they can export their products and they also access funding from the bank for processing, it is not enough to grow it and have a market locally. It is further processing and adding value to it before you export. So instead of exporting the shea butter nut, which was expected from us, the Bank of Industry, they know that we actually approve facilities for them to buy plant and machinery, and after buying the plant and machinery, they know what market they can go to. So the entire process has changed completely. it is not just the big businesses. When we do work for big businesses, we look for markets for the big businesses from the small businesses so that the entire value chain is covered. So for us, POTICO has been a great success in ensuring that our mandates, how we're doing it, is deepened further.
If you look at some of the workshops that have been done in the past and that will be done today, when you help a farmer with hybrid seeds, when you help a farmer with better food storage and better food handling, when you help a potential entrepreneur with better food labeling so that the product can be exported with the proper food label that's really required by a lot of countries in terms of their import laws, including the United States. Those are things that help build the process toward export. So a lot of them you're not going to see necessarily in sales figures, although there are those. But there are a lot of intangible things that have come with better helping the entrepreneur or the potential farmer increase their yields and also better handle food and food storage issues as well as export labeling so that they can actually export their products to a market.
Then it was time for the workshops with U.S. agencies for more analysis and workaday solutions to investment challenges, power problems, linkage, and commodity management issues. While those were holding simultaneously, a high-powered strategic working lunch was also underway.